Welcome to the ODDSBREAKER'S #1 place for shared sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 27 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow us on Twitter at the ODDSBREAKERS and follow us on social media / the ODDSBREAKERS. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag for a 50% bonus. Please visit mybookie and use the promo code the ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, sponsor the podcast and the website, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com and click shop and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. If you'd like to make a one-time donation, you can do it through Patreon. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. We had a great weekend of UFC. We went 2-2 in our free plays. They're also premium plays, but profitable because of all the plus money. Qatar won within the distance, which was awesome. Nagano actually floored Rosenstruck. That wasn't much of a fight. It was like a 15-second fight, but at least we took the under 1.5 to mitigate that, so that was fantastic. And in general, it was just a great time watching these fights. I played a few more myself, had a pretty good day, bet Alexi at like plus 240, and that worked out well. So big thanks to Cub fan Danny for talking about those fights. He ended up doing well on the card as well, so real happy about that. There's a lot more going on. Wednesday night there's fights. Saturday night there's fights. There's going to be a bunch more popping up. Waiting for the announcement for UFC 250. So having a lot of fun with that because it's really, partially all that we have. There's horse racing too. We're going to see if there's anything worth digging into this weekend. MLB made an announcement that they're planning on returning in July. I guess the players have to decide to do that as well. They're going to have to take a pay cut, and I know they're kind of discussing that right now. Not sure if that's going to put a hold on things. So Arizona already, their governor is allowing pro sports in the state. They can resume on Saturday, the 16th, which is fantastic. Of course, there's going to be no fans yet, but hopefully that momentum increases throughout the United States. The Louisville Slugger factory is back in production. Of course, they were closed down the last few months, just like everybody else. Japanese baseball is hoping for a June start as well. So as you can see, there's momentum kind of going towards turning this economy back on. Hopefully everything turns out well and we can see a momentum saying goodbye to this virus. Well, my friends, if you like the NFL, then we have a great show for you today. With the return of baseball coming in July, fingers crossed, it looks like NFL will go on, and it probably will start with limited or no fans in the stadium. But the good news is we can still talk about it and feel confident about it. Now that we had the NFL draft, we know that there's teams that have acquired players through free agency, lost players through free agency, trades, and now that they acquired the players from the draft, we can get a good idea on season win totals. The schedule just came out on last Thursday, so we know how tough it is for some teams and how easy it is for some teams, how medium it is for some teams as well, coming in to the 2020 season. So when I look at all this, I like to use numbers from the year before. I like to use mathematical equations like the Pythagorean theorem. I like to look at teams if they were injured reward. If they were overly healthy, I'll take away a little bit. If they were not healthy at all, I'll give them back a little bit from last year. I subtract for players leaving, more for quarterbacks. I will add if a quarterback's good and goes to another team. I think you know of one right now that happened. I will reward teams for having an easy schedule coming up this year, and I'll take away if they have a hard schedule. Kind of same thing from 2019. If their schedule was really hard, I'll give them back a little bit. And if their schedule was really easy, I'll take away a little bit from the year before, just to try to get to a good season win total. And it's worked for me over the years. So this is kind of what I'm going to go over division by division and see if there's any plays for you on the season win totals. So we're going to cover two divisions today, and that will be the NFC North and the NFC South.
You're ridiculously good looking.
So before we get into this, I want to remind you that I take their 2019 record and then look at their 2019 Pythagorean record and kind of average the two. And the reason we do Pythagorean, as a reminder, is because sometimes teams will just get lucky and win a bunch of games where they shouldn't be awarded so much, and sometimes they were very unlucky. Let's look at the far outliers. A team can go 16-0 and only win every game by 1 point. Well, if that's the case, their Pythagorean was actually 8.5. And when you're predicting for next season, you're not going to think that they're going to win 14 games because they were 16-0 that year. And it's the same on the other side. If they lose every game by 1 point, their Pythagorean is really 7.5, going by the zero. You might not be too excited to bet anything under 7 on this team, even though they won 0 games that year. So I think there's some clutch factor to it. So I average those two together before I get into my other adjustments like injuries, key losses, draft free agencies, strength of schedule, etc., etc. Starting with the NFC North. This conference has to play the NFC South this year and the AFC South, okay? Not to mention they always play each other twice, right? That's why they're in a division. So that's pretty tough. I mean, the NFC South has teams like Tampa Bay has improved with Tom Brady. They also have the Saints there, as we know, the Falcons. The Carolinas might be taking this year off. We'll see. We'll talk about them later. And, the AFC South had 2 playoff teams last year with the Texans and the Titans, and looks like the Colts are kind of getting back. So this, in general, for the NFC North is a pretty tough schedule. So if you go into the Green Bay Packers, their Vegas win total is 9. Okay. Their at-large games are the other top 2 in the other divisions, the Eagles in the NFC East and the 49ers in the NFC West. So they have to play the top teams for being the top in the division last year. Their key losses, offensive tackle Brian Bulaga, tight end Jimmy Graham, not terrible there. Their key additions, linebacker Christian Kirksey, offensive tackle Ricky Wagner, and wide receiver Devin Funchess. That's key right there, getting another wide receiver to complement Adams. So whom they drafted, Jordan Love, quarterback in the first round, running back A.J. Dillon, second round, interior offensive lineman Jake Hansen, and offensive tackle John Runyon. So this draft was very questionable. Why they do this? It's somewhat worrisome because you wonder how Rodgers is going to look at it, and he wanted some more help on the receivers. It's just kind of a weird dynamic between him and LaFleur right now. If you look at Rodgers, his QBR has been bad the last 2 years, and his completion percentage has been definitely not like himself over the last 2 years either. So you wonder if LaFleur might be trying to move towards a Ravens-type power offense. It almost feels like that, getting a quarterback like Jordan Love that has legs to run, because that's what he did a lot in Utah. There's a big threat of his legs, and he was able to complete some passes, especially the year before Gary Anderson got there. He looked a lot better. So that's really interesting to me. And so we'll see how that goes. 3-game difference between their Pythagorean win total and the last year's win total. They won 13 games, but their Pythag was only 9.8. That really worries me. I took away a game for them being extremely healthy last year as well. I mean, they were very healthy, and they went into the playoffs healthy. But they, like I said, this draft was very, very head scratching to me. It's almost like they're trying to give up on their quarterback, and I just feel my theory is right. They're trying to emulate the Ravens offense, a little bit of the Niners offense, and some of the running plays from the Rams that you saw when LaFleur was the coordinator out there. I'm thinking they're going to probably put that in. They're going to be a run-first type offense, so I'm not so sure Rodgers is going to be extremely happy here. But in saying all that, my calculation has their wins over 9. So I think their schedule is just medium. Their schedule is medium hard for 2020, but last year their schedule was just medium, so I take away a half win for that. I think the players that they lost, with Jimmy Graham and their best, I thought their best tackle was Bulaga. I took away a half game for that. And I gave them back a half game for draft and free agency. So that kind of like fixed each other out, it zeroed each other out. Their Vegas win total was 9. My projected win total is 9.9. But it's not quite enough for a play. I need over a game to a game and a half to make a play. And I'm not always going to make a play here. I'm staying away just because I don't know what the dynamic's going to be between LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers right now. But my lean, I guess, if I had one, would be to the over, but I'm just giving that as no play. Next team is the Minnesota Vikings. Win total is also at 9. So you're looking at their schedule. It's a medium hard, and it might even be a little bit harder than medium hard. Their at-large games are against the Cowboys and the Seahawks. Well, most people would look at the Cowboys as being better than the Eagles. So it's almost like they're playing the best team from last year in the NFC East, even though the Eagles made the playoffs. And the Seahawks are always tough with Russell Wilson. So no favors there for the Vikings schedule-wise. Key losses, there's a lot of them. Defensive tackle Linville Jones, cornerback Trey Wayans, defensive end Stephen Weatherly, defensive end Everson Griffin, which I thought there was their best player on defense a few years there. Safety Andrews Ndeho, cornerback Xavier Rhodes. The list goes on. Stephon Diggs was traded. Holy cow. I mean, this defense is going to look different. A lot different from last year. Their key additions were just defensive tackle Michael Pierce, guard Josh Klein, and defensive tackle Shamar Stephen. So they drafted a ton. They had 15 draft picks, but there's really a lot of no-names there. The key guys were obviously Justin Jefferson from LSU, cornerback Jeff Gladney, tackle Ezra Cleveland, cornerback Cameron Dantzler, and just like a ton of other dudes. They got a lot younger, which is good, but I'm not sure if that's good for next year. They shed a ton of contracts, a ton of players, but I mean, trading Stephen Diggs for Justin Jefferson, I don't even think that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. I think that's just giving away somebody better and bringing in a draft choice that you hope is really good, that was in a fantastic system at LSU. The Vikings were pretty healthy in general last year. Kirk Cousins just could never play well out of his 1 p.m. Eastern time slot. It was kind of key for him to be in the 1 p.m. time slot over the years. It seemed plays a Sunday night game, Monday night game, the Pacific later game. it just doesn't make sense for him, and he does a bad job when he does it. So the Vikings are going to have a hard schedule, like I said. They did overachieve a bit last year, I think, but I had to adjust their win total a little bit when coming into this, because they should have had 11 wins last year if they didn't play all second and third stringers against the Bears at home. Their game's 17 because it wasn't going to help their playoffs. So I gave them a half game for that. You got to remember that a lot of those games, teams didn't even play their starters, and heck, their second and third string almost beat the Bears. But their, Pythagorean was around there too at 10.8. So I give them a 10.7. They were pretty healthy. I take away a half game for being healthy last year. Their schedule was medium, so nothing given them or taken away nothing. Medium hard for this year, so I'm taking away a half game. Key losses, I took away 2 games on their key losses because I thought their defense was huge when it comes to some of these games, and I think they're completely revamping it, and I'm not sure if I agree with how fast they did that. But just because their draft and free agency was so loaded, I'll give them a game back. So their Vegas win total is 9. My number is 8.7. So no play, but I have a slight lean to the under on this one. Next, we have the Chicago Bears.
But they are who we thought they were.
Well, they weren't last year. I actually didn't play their win total last year. It was around 9.5. That was my number as well. But they underachieved and actually won 8 games. But I had to make that adjustment at the Vikings and bring it down to 7.5 games. But their Pythagorean was around there as well at 7.4. Okay. So they were kind of injured last year. Mack was out a few games. Trubisky was out a few games. Anthony Miller on offense was out a few games. Defensively, Akeem Hicks was out a few games. Danny Trevathan got injured, missed a bunch. I mean, they were pretty injured last year, but I'm not giving them back for that because they had some pretty good backups that came in, like Kwiatkowski, Pierre Lewis, and Williams. Just some good guys that filled in. So I had to take that into consideration there. But their strength of schedule last year was medium hard. Got to give them a half game back for that. So, and their strength of schedule this year is actually medium easy. Their at-large games are against the Rams and the Giants. Now, the Rams are interesting. We'll get to them later, but they're still the third best team in the NFC West, a very stacked NFC West. So it's not like you have to play the Niners or the Seahawks. And the Giants are still up and coming. So that's good. Their key losses were quarterback Chase Daniel, linebacker Nick Kwiatkowski, offensive linebacker Leonard Floyd, outside linebacker Leonard Floyd, nose tackle Nick Williams, free safety Clinton Dix, and some other guys. A little bit of depth, but I mean, they didn't lose a lot of skill positions or anything. Quarterback key additions, Nick Foles here. He was a key addition, obviously. And looks like he's probably going to be starting unless Mitch all of a sudden shows him like he's Superman in the offseason. Outside linebacker Robert Quinn they got for a pass rusher, so to replace Floyd. Tight end Jimmy Graham, safety DM Bush, linebacker Martavius Mingo, wide receiver Ted Ginn Jr. Question is, does he still have the burner? The feet, who they drafted, tight end Cole Clement, cornerback Jalen Johnson, and wide receiver Darnell Mooney. So those were their key picks. Mooney was from Tulane. He's a speedster guy. It's going to be him or Ginn, really. What I have to say about the whole Trubisky-Foles thing, I'm not sure Foles is that great either. If you look at his numbers, he was like the worst quarterback on first and second down, actually ranked worse than Mitch. But on third down, for some reason, he was the best quarterback, like better than any other quarterback in the league. His third down percentage and his deep throws, he was just hitting a lot on third down over the last 2-3 years when he played at the Eagles and a little bit at Jacksonville. So that was a kind of a weird stat there, but it doesn't make me super excited for Nick Foles, but the team is still pretty stacked from all the rebuilding years. The question is, are they going to be able to put it all together? I think they should have kept Nick Kwiatkowski and let Danny Trevathan go, which has always been an injury concern with Trevathan. Kwiatkowski played a hell of a year last year. Pace obviously paid too much for Jimmy Graham, way too much. Just one of those cases where he wasn't bidding against anybody but himself. So that's another head scratcher there. I'm not sure what to think about that. But the important thing is that their schedule is going to be easier this year. A lot easier. It all started last year when they lost to the Packers, their first game of the season at home. It all went downhill from there. Just losing that game was awful for them. It was an ugly game. I think they lost like 10-3. They could have been fine during the regular season and bounce back if they didn't have two terrible losses against the Raiders in London and against the Chargers. Those are two games they should have won. I had to punish them a half game for barely beating the Vikings, like I said before, bring it down to 7.5. That was a bad look. Couldn't even play against a bunch of second and third stringers. And obviously they were probably just pretty much given up on the season by then. Akeem Hicks's injury was bad. Trubisky's, Mac, that definitely hurt them, as I mentioned before. But their schedule, pretty hard, ranking 7th hardest last year against team efficiencies. And this year, the schedule looks medium easy. And I forgot to mention, when I look at strength of schedule, I don't look at how they did against how the teams did last year. I go against the Vegas win totals, just because some teams are going to have some huge ups and downs. Like if you face the Patriots next year, it's a lot easier than facing them last year when they had Tom Brady, right? So you have to think that the presence of a new quarterback might motivate this team for a while, or at least it'll push Mitch to become way better if he somehow retains his starting position. But what I will say is Khalil Mack is due for a big year after a disappointing year. He was at a very disappointing 2019. So what I like here is the Bears, they had a lot of wins the year before, and then they regressed and still were able to eke out the 7.5 wins that I talked about. And their schedule went from really hard to easy. So going from the Pythag of 7.4, my actual win total was 7.5. Just going to keep it right there at 7.5. Not going to give them nothing for injuries. Going to add a half game for having a pretty hard schedule last year and a medium easy schedule, a half game this year. They didn't lose much, as you see, to free agency. They didn't lose any of their key players, so I only took a quarter game off there, but I'm adding a game and a quarter for draft free agency because they have a better quarterback now, or one that's going to make our quarterback better. I say our because I'm a Bear fan. So 1.25 for what they got from the draft and free agency. Their Vegas win total is 8, and my number is right at 9.5. So it's very close to a play, but here's the problem. I mean, if Nick Foles doesn't turn out well, he's getting older, and like the stats I told you on first and second down, he was terrible. I'm not comfortable that they're going to get 9 or 10 wins. I think it could be 7 or 8 again this year. So that's why I'm going to have to lean to the over there. But like I said before, this team does have a lot of talent on their defense. From all the rebuilding years, they won 12 games the year before. I would not be surprised if they won 9 or 10 games. I lean to the over. All right, and that brings up the lowly Detroit Lions. 3 games they won last year. 3. So the Lions, their schedule is also medium easy like the Bears. Their at-large games are against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have improved, and the Redskins. The Redskins are bad. Their key losses were guard Graham Glasgow, outside linebacker Devin Kennard, and defensive tackle Ashawn Robinson. Key additions. I have it as Jamie Collins on linebacker, Vayate on guard, Desmond Trufant at cornerback, and defensive tackle Nick Williams from the Bears. Those are some pretty good additions right there. And whom they drafted, cornerback Jeffrey Okudah from Ohio State, running back DeAndre Swift, edge rusher Julian Okwara from Notre Dame, and I thought that was a good pick in the third round. Wide receiver Quintez Cephas, as you know, I know a lot about him being a Badger. The Lions did a lot of robbing to Peter to pay Paul, really in the offseason. Replacing guard for guard, defensive tackle for defensive tackle, stuff like that. There was a huge Pythagorean win discrepancy with them. Pythag says they should have won 6 games instead of 3. Well, you remember they tied that game against Arizona, so I give them a half game back for a tie. Matt Stafford only played half the games, so I have to make a very big injury accommodation here to my win totals, especially when it's a quarterback like that. If it was like a cornerback or a defensive tackle that only played half the games, you don't make much of adjustment at all. If it's a quarterback and he's one of the good ones, Matt Stafford, you make a much bigger adjustment. So the Lions flat out worst team and opponent passing yards per game, and they went out and paid for Desmond Trufant and drafted Jeffrey Okudah. So I like that. Adding Jamie Collins from the Patriots and drafting Okwara should help them get a few extra sacks. So kind of liking what they did here. And if Matt Stafford stays healthy, then maybe I really like it. Let's break it down. 3.5 wins. Pythag is 5.9, so that averages to 4.7, giving them 1.5 games back for their quarterback being injured in Stafford. Schedule was medium hard last year, so I give them a half game for that. Their schedule is medium easy this year. Give them a half game for that. Really, they didn't lose really anybody, and I give them 3/4 of a game back for their draft and free agency. So their Vegas win total was 6.5. I have it all the way up to 7.85 from everything that they did. So having the easier schedule, this is an actual play. We are going to take the Lions over 6.5 wins. And I already sent this out to premium customers. So this is a premium play. Take it and lock it up.
You better lock it up. You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up. Lock it up.
If you remember what the Lions do, they always have a bad year, then they have a good year too. So kind of hoping on going on that momentum as well. And if you want to look at the future price on the Lions, it is plus 700 to win the division. So if you think the Vikings and Packers can regress enough, then I think that plus 700 has some value. I mean, the fact that I was able to get their season win total, not that far away from the Packers. The Packers are 9.9, and I have the Lions at 7.85. That plus 700 has a little bit of value, so I'll throw a half unit on that as well. Moving on to the next conference that we are going to discuss. It is the NFC South. And some great teams, obviously, in the NFC South. You have the Saints there that's been dominant for years now. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are just landed the best quarterback of all time, according to most people. And you have the Atlanta Falcons that was in the Super Bowl somewhat recently, as well as the Carolina Panthers, who landed a coach that has some serious offensive experience, as well as an offensive coordinator that came from LSU. So this is a tough division. They actually have a medium hard schedule, I put it, because they have to play the AFC West, which has an up-and-coming Raiders and Broncos team. Don't forget the Super Bowl champ, Kansas City Chiefs. And they have to play the NFC North, who, as you know, with the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears, and the Lions are pretty good, as I just went over. So that's a tough schedule. The most interesting thing to watch will be how Tom Brady does with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because the hype factor on this team is literally through the roof. Woo! All right, let's get into the New Orleans Saints here. Win total from Vegas is 10.5. Pretty high right there. But this team obviously has been approaching and passing that total over the last few years. This team has a medium hard schedule at large games versus the 49ers and the Packers. So there you go. Key losses. Quarterback Teddy Bridgewater obviously did a fantastic job while filling in. Strong safety Von Bell and outside linebacker A.J. Klein. Key additions, quarterback Jameis Winston, free safety Malcolm Jenkins, and wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who they drafted. Not a lot of picks. Cesar Ruiz from Michigan, the center/guard, and Zach Bond was key, I think, at linebacker from Wisconsin. So obviously, like I said, not a ton of picks, but the Saints did retain a lot of talent, re-sign them. I'm a little concerned about their secondary getting older. You know, they're aging and losing Von Bell. So this year I'm going to be watching their secondary, and they better get to the quarterback. But it's really their only weakness, minus Drew Brees' age. This is a fantastic offense. Sean Payton, genius offense. I really like the Jameis Winston pickup, because if anyone can help pry their head out of their ass, it's Sean Payton, in my opinion. The Saints have always been overachievers under him. Then they hit the playoffs, and that's debatable, but they are regular season monsters. Their Pythagorean win total was only 10.9 compared to their 13 wins. So roughly 2 games off there. They didn't do a ton in free agency, but I do like what they did with Emmanuel Sanders, and if they use him right, it's just going to be another huge weapon, and it kind of replaces Ted Ginn a little bit. But I think Emmanuel Sanders does some better route running than Ginn, and he's just kind of that all-purpose receiver when Ted Ginn was more of just a deep threat. So let's go over it here. Season win totals. We have a 12 on average for Pythagorean and record. They were pretty healthy, so I took a half game away for being healthy. They had a medium schedule last year, no adjustment. Medium hard this year, minus 0.5 games. Key losses, really 0, because the draft and free agency was kind of 0 too. I could have punished them a little bit and gave them the same back, is what I'm trying to say. Didn't need to. The Vegas win total is at 10.5, and because of all of this, I actually have them at 11 wins exactly. So, I mean, their toughest competition looks to be Tampa Bay, but we'll get into them. But going from 10.5 to 11 is not a play for me. So I'm going to lean to the over on 10.5. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Win total is 9.5, juiced to the over at minus 140. So it's actually more like 9.8. Okay. Their schedule is medium. Their at-large games are versus the Bears and the Rams. I guess I could have done Atlanta second because they took second in the division last year, but this is how I wrote it up. Defensive end, Carl Nassib is part of their key losses. Defensive tackle Bo Allen was a loss. Jameis Winston, obviously, and running back Peyton Barber was part of the key losses. But their key additions, come on, Tom Brady. There you go. Tackle Joel Haig. I thought that was a good right tackle acquisition. He played with the Colts. Whom they drafted, tackle Tristan Wirfs. He was one of the top ones to go in the draft. Safety Antoine Winfield. I really liked how he played at Minnesota when he was healthy. The dude was injured a ton. Wide receiver Tyler Johnson from Minnesota. I thought he was a sleeper pick myself in the draft. And defensive lineman Khalil Davis. So I'd like to draft a lot. Obviously, landing Tom Brady is the biggest thing that Tampa's ever done in free agency. But at the same time, Jameis Winston wasn't all that bad. Okay, he threw for over 5,100 yards last year. And part of the reason he had 30 interceptions was the fact that their secondary sucked. They were so bad last year, and the Bucs had to play catch up. All right. My biggest worry here is that they really didn't try to fix their secondary in free agency or even in the draft. All right. So my thought is Tom Brady is going to have to be throwing a ton of balls in his 43-year-old arm. 40 to 50 times per game he might be throwing. Being that this team gained Brady, I awarded them 2 more wins over Winston in this medium schedule, but it was tough for me to do because I really think that it wasn't just Winston that messed this team up. You know, it's just a lot of their defense. The rest of the gains and losses are really a wash in my opinion, but I'll go over it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 7 wins last year, 8.2 Pythag. So as you see with Winston, they had the points to look better than average there. So average that 7.6. 0 adjustment for injuries. They were kind of medium with injuries. Medium schedule this year. Medium schedule last year. So no adjustment with that. The next one I go over is the key losses. Just took away a half game. I mean, they didn't lose a ton. Some defense of tackles, right? I mean, you got to look at that mostly, in my opinion, with Bo Allen and Nassib. You remember that Tampa Bay had one of the best running defenses. They were 8th in sacks, yet they didn't fix their secondary. I'm keep coming back to. Their draft and free agency, I give them a 2.5. 2 for Brady and a half game for just how well they drafted, really. So I shot that by a lot, but that only brings me to 9.6 wins when their win total is 9.5 juiced to the over. So if it's really 9.8 because it's minus 140, then I lean to the under. I'm probably not going to touch this one. And I'll be honest with you, right when Brady signed, I did take them to win the conference at like 10-1, and it's now like 5-1. But I just took that for straight value. I can resell that ticket too. I still think that I would have to lean to the under on this win total because I think that Brady is going to be just trying to play catch up this whole game. This team's secondary was so bad that they ranked 2nd or 3rd worst in passing yards per game, opponent passing yards per game, and they still ranked top 8 in sacks per game. So don't know why they didn't go out and get somebody there. Very disappointed in that. So there you go. Tampa, really no play. Next team I want to talk about is the Atlanta Falcons. The win total is 7.5, slightly juiced to the over at minus 130. Their schedule, hard. According to the Vegas win totals, they play the highest win totals added up. Atlanta plays the Seahawks and the Cowboys for at large, just like the Vikings have to. Okay, that's tough. Not easy at all. Key losses, tight end Austin Hooper, who was huge for this team last year. Edge rusher Vic Beasley. He never really panned out, but he was double teamed a ton, kind of like Mac was last year. Guard Wes Schweitzer. Cornerback Desmond Trufant. Outside linebacker Devondre Campbell. Running back Devontae Freeman. And a bunch of other defense. Key additions, running back Todd Gurley and his knee. Defensive end Dante Fowler, guard Justin McCray, and tight end Hayden Hurst. So who they drafted? Cornerback A.J. Terrell from Clemson, defensive line Marlon Davidson, and linebacker Michael Walker. This team somehow eked out 7 wins last year. while having a tough schedule. They started out 1-7, okay? And somehow they won their last 4 games in a row, including at San Francisco. That was impressive. Well, unfortunately, this year, the schedule's even worse. They rank, like I said, the hardest in the league, their schedule. And, part of the reason is they have to play the Saints in Tampa Bay. They have win totals that are high. They have to play them twice. So the strange thing about the schedule, they start out playing Seattle game 1, and in week 2, they play at Dallas. They play their at-large games right away. I don't know if it's a good thing for them or a bad thing, but I thought that was interesting to point out. They were healthy last year for most of the year, but they lost a ton of their talent in free agency. I mean, they replaced Austin Hooper with Hayden Hurst, who was a top tight end pick, but he didn't prove anything in the league. He didn't prove anything with Baltimore. They also didn't resign Devontae Freeman, and they replaced him with an ailing Todd Gurley. So a guy that doesn't know the offense, coming from the Rams. I thought that was very, very mysterious. Looking at who they lost on defense, I mean, this is their top 5 guys on defense, really. I mean, Devondre Campbell, Desmond Trufant, Vic Beasley, 3 of their top 5 guys there for sure. I guess Lorenzo Neal would be another one that they retained, So I had to punish this team 2 full games with what they lost in free agency and only give them a half game back for the free agency and draft. Okay. Just losing leaders on their team, Devontae Freeman. It's going to look different this year, and they have the hardest schedule here. So here's how it all comes together. The Atlanta Falcons had 7 wins last year. Their Pythag was 7.5, so I got to start with 7.3. No injury adjustment. Their schedule was hard last year, so I gave them a game, and it's going to be hard this year, so I took away a game. That washes out. Their key losses, I had to take 2 games away, like I said, for all that they lost and give them a half game back for their draft and free agency. That puts us at 5.8 wins, and their win total is at 7.5, and 5.8 is over a game and a half here. So we have to take the under here for our free play in the NFC South. Atlanta under 7.5 wins. Looks like it's going to be a good day.
Today was a good day.
Next team, we have the Carolina Panthers. Finally getting down to them. Lots of people are fading this Carolina Panther team. Lots. Okay. I mean, they sold a lot of people. They lost a lot of people. They're restructuring. But I got to tell you, I like how they're restructuring so much that I'm afraid to take that win total under 5.5. Their schedule is medium hard. They have at-large games against the Cardinals, who are supposed to be better by a good amount this year, and the Redskins. Okay. So their key losses: cornerback James Bradbury, defensive end Mario Addison, defensive tackle Jared McCoy, defensive tackle Vernon Butler. Those guys were injured last year anyway. Tight end Greg Olson, defensive end Bruce Irvin, guard Trey Turner, quarterback Cam Newton, but it's not a key loss because he's not coming back this year anyway. So, I don't really count that. It's not like I'm taking away a bunch of wins last year because he really didn't play last year. So I just want to mention that. Key additions, Coach Matt Rule. We saw what he did at Baylor. Just turned that program around after it was in shambles. And offensive coordinator Joe Brady, that was the biggest part of the play calling and the RPO game that led LSU to their national championship last year. That is some quality pickups right there. Quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, wide receiver Robbie Anderson, wide receiver Stephon Weatherly, tackle Russell Okung. So, who they drafted? Defensive lineman Derek Brown, one of the top D linemen in the draft. Edge rusher Yatur Gross-Matos from Penn State. He was my second best edge guy coming in this year. This draft. Safety Jeremy Chin and quarterback Troy Pride. All right. Carolina was, like I said, very injured. It all started out with Newton. he's never been that honest about his injuries. His shoulder didn't seem right. He wasn't passing accurately the last couple of years. His foot got injured supposedly in preseason, but he didn't talk about it much. He's had back injuries from a car accident, ankle problems. Can't really give anything back. He's not coming back. So we know it's supposed to be Teddy Bridgewater at the helm here. And for me, there's a lot of uncertainty. The man got a little over $20 million a year for 3 years, which is great. Congratulations to him. But I just do not know if it's more Sean Payton that made his success or if it was him. I mean, a lot of those throws were short, short throws to like Cook and Kasim Hill and Kamara, and they were explosive because the yards after catch were absolutely amazing. But, I'm not sure if I can just trust that. Lots of uncertainty there, but this team could be surprising. They have a shot at being surprising. I think there's upside here. It could be. And don't forget Christian McCaffrey there and DJ Moore. I didn't take any bets on them, but it's really interesting seeing a 5.5 win total here when I love the coaches coming in so much. At the same time, this could be a rebuilding year where Christian McCaffrey gets benched by game 10 so they don't have wear and tear on him for the next year. Vegas win total is kind of telling you that is a better chance of happening. But in my opinion, maybe it is better to take a shot at them to, win the division or something. If it's like in the over plus 1,000 or something like that, I'd have to take a look at it. Here's what I have and how I figured it out for them. Carolina Panthers had 5 wins. Their Pythag was 4.9. So it's average is about 5. Injury player adjustment. I gave them a game back. Like I said, nothing for Newton because some of those players do come back. Their schedules was very hard last year. It was listed as hard, so I'm giving them a game back for that. Their schedule is medium hard this year, so take away a half game. Key losses, they lost a ton of people. They take away a game for that. But draft and free agency and their coaches coming in, I gave them a game and a quarter for that. So their Vegas win total is 5.5, but my actual projected win total is 6.75. So I lean to the over. I have a strong lean to the over, but I'm not ready to take it just because of all the uncertainty here. But to be honest with you, I'm higher on the Panthers than a lot of other people are because I like what they're doing here. Let's see if they get turned around, and I'm going to think more about that because if this win total gets pounded any farther down, maybe it's going to be 5 soon, 4.5, like what happened to the Miami Dolphins last year. I might have to take the over on the Panthers. Well, my friends, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. That's all the time that we have today. Kind of a nice, easy, short podcast for you. A little bit of NFL. The good news is it looks like we're going to have a season here. If you have any questions, please feel free to tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Everyone out there, stay safe. Watch a little UFC. Have a great time this weekend. You go get some winners.